how does one succeed at this relationship? Kind of, is there a fuel on the fire of this type of practice? The folks that you see like really changing by leaps and bounds quickly, do you see a commonality?
Feel for you.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. First of all, I'm trying to work myself out of a job from the first day.
Yeah.
Some people I need to walk with a long time. Some people, not so much. Um, the deliverable is basically therapy usually ends when either the therapist or the patient start to kind of wonder, you think I really need to come once a week? And I was like, hey, that's a new conversation, and we'll kind of go over it. Once again, we're co-creating what's happening. It's not, I'm not fixing you. I can't do that. But we can go to these places together and conjure, like what's important to you, and kind of get a clearer view as to like what you want in life, how to get there. So for some people, completion of a good course of therapy is their behavior is different, their thinking's different, their feelings are different. For most people, it's a subtle blend. Mostly, they feel like they've internalized the process and my voice enough to I can kind of take it from here. I think I'm good. And that is that's an amazing place to be, to see somebody get there. And think they're pretty much going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really hits me, and I'm so honored to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where the ending of the relationship, like that's where it ends, and we terminate officially. I sort of de-roll myself, but I will always be that person's therapist, whether they come see me or not. I will always be there if I'm alive. Dead, they may have to work out something else.
You've influenced them, and almost, I guess the thing that came to my mind when as you were talking was when they leave, there's like a Dan Workman voice in their head that's supporting them in some way. That now
It's the
you've
conversation.
right.
It's less me having sort of talked to myself into the point where they can hear me. That can happen quickly.
Well, those
But
self-defeating beliefs. Well,
yeah,
I guess I think like when you were a kid, I don't know that this is true or not, but when you wake up to life, to agency, to whatever we want to call it, and you have all these thoughts in your heads, how did they get there? Most likely they were the voice of your mom or your dad or some bully when you were a kid. They were influences from the external world. And so I think of their time with you as balancing that out with different type of voices, different type of thoughts, different types of ideas, even if it's a invitation for them to contemplate.
it's at minimum a balance. At its highest level, they get a chance to understand what happened to them, and they get a chance to see, oh, that's where this comes from. And you don't have to have that layer of insight. You don't have to know where it comes from, but it's like to be able to understand. I have a tendency to do this. It was probably the bigger people in the world that kind of modeled this for me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's these weird outliers where people turn into very different people than the people that raised them. That's a fascinating thing. How did they get involved in art when they were like living on a dairy farm? That happens. The Bronte sisters, how did they possibly learn to write about experiences no girl of their age when they began writing would ever have? There's something that can happen to us, and that's a pretty cool place to be.
Is it the first thing I heard was to understand what happened to them, to understand why this thought exists or this limitation exists? And is that pointing back to, oh, when I was in middle school, I got beat up by this guy and then, or by this gal, or I got beat up and then I thought I'm fragile and vulnerable and I won't stand up again or something like that? Is it pointing to an event?
Well, psychodynamic therapy, which is what I practice,
Yeah.
is all going back and looking at early relationships, early influences in life. Because as you before you have any say in it, you're being sort of programmed as to what acceptable behaviors are, acceptable beliefs. This is what our family does. And it's only as the kid kind of goes to school that they start to compare notes with other kids. Really, y'all get to do that? Man, we don't. We can't. Like this. It's weird.
Yeah.
They don't. You never even think that they're showing you how, like your relationship with the two primary male and females in your life. Hopefully, it's mom and dad. They teach you what to expect from every other female or every other male.
Yeah.
That is the core operating system programming. So, and then from there, it gets embellished by a lot of things. Maybe Uncle Mike is really a lot cooler than my parents. I don't spend much time with him, but man, I remember every single thing we did. Things like that.
Primary conditioning occurs in the home.
Wherever that early environment is, a nice stable home with some good sort of like well-adjusted parents would be great. But a lot of us don't get
have that. Yeah.
Well, a lot of it doesn't take much to make a baby, but it takes a lot to raise a human.
Yep. And to build a nest,
Right.
To have that human.
Well, and to most young adults, as they start to raise a family, at least in our culture, our minds are not on sort of like, what is a way we can introduce Junior to like, the richness of the world.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, get up and I want your socks on by the time you come down for breakfast. It's like and of course it has to be age appropriate, but a lot of households lack a sense of wonder, like curiosity.
Yeah.
There's not much room for curiosity when you're trying to get your 2-year-old to quit having a meltdown in Kroger.
It's
all right?
compliance. It's like compliance.
Right.
It's authoritarian.
Darling, yes. Can you imagine like why we're here? It's like, how do you even do that? But it can happen. And being a human is a very imperfect experience. Most of all, and the people I work with and some of my favorite people just out in the world are involved in a rolling corrective experience, their original programming. They have to do things that sort of like allow them to sort of kick down these artificial barriers or allow them to see things they didn't see before. And not everyone is even so motivated to do that. It could be that like my highest version of myself is having a slightly better bass boat than Billy down the street. My bass boat's got 2 motors on it, and his has 1. It's like, in that in and of itself might be a really good life for somebody. But man, that could be the guy that's designing next level bass boats. If he had the chance and the agency to realize that he might have some talents and skills beyond just catting around and being a human in a passive fashion.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's a lot.
That was a perfect amount, Dan.
Okay. All right. Good.
If you would have said one more word, it would have been too much.
It would have been, awful.